My name is Chris Anderson, Director of Innovation Process for also Bloy. We make products. So I guess maybe before going into what the company does, I have experience working in a lot of different industries, applying lean, agile, and prior to working with also Bloy, making components that are in construction, aka locks and smart locks. I worked with a large general contractor, working on very large projects as a lean, agile, last planner coach. So I definitely understand the industry, and wanted to talk today a little bit about not just agile, but also scaling agile. So as projects and teams become more complicated, some of the I guess some of the complaints that people have is, well, that might work for a small startup, but that's not going to work for my project. My project's too complex for that, right? So so maybe, yeah, there you go. So just maybe here is good. So also Bloy, we make a lot of products. Also Bloy is a very large company. You've probably heard of many of their brands, including HID, Yale, August. The division I work in is smart residential, so we make smart products. So some of those products listed here, a lot of smart locks, some accessories, safes, smart cabinet locks, smart delivery boxes. Anyways, so we make a lot of smart products that you have an app, you can lock, unlock using your phone. All right, next slide. It's a very complex group. We're very global in that if you look at our percentage of sales by region, it's pretty distributed across the world. We have about 430-ish people in smart residential, but in terms of the folks that would support our team within the regions, there's probably more like closer to 900 or so. Yeah, again, most of our sales are within door locks, but also, like I said before, there's other products that make up probably about 25%. And then in terms of growth, I mean, we're seeing a lot of organic kind of growth. That's just as IoT becomes a bigger thing, a lot of we're just seeing again organic growth where we're just trying to make sure we can continue to keep up with the demand, especially with all the shortages, and agile is definitely a huge piece of that, making sure as the situation changes daily, making sure our geographically distributed teams are able to keep up with all of the changing conditions across all of the regions. China right now, obviously we hear you see how there's lockdown, and that's creating a lot of challenges, but again, through agile processes, we're able to cope with these changes as best as possible, to continue to deliver projects, to continue to deliver products, and we don't I guess run out of inventory, things like that. So again, it's easier said than done, but again, Agile's been a very big part of that. All right, next slide. All right, so into the presentation, I always like to bring it back to the root. So W. Edwards Deming, for those of you that have studied the kind of the history of lean, he was very in the early days, traveled to Japan, did some work with Toyota, and he always has some really good quotes, so put that one in here. It's not necessary to change, survival is not mandatory. Obviously, it's in order to survive over time, we know that change is part of life, it's part of business, and our ability to change, our ability to learn is going to determine whether or not we have a sustainable business, or a growing business, or a flat business. But to me, the biggest thing is our ability to change, but our ability to change in a purposeful way, in a way that that is moving in a positive direction. So again, I think that's probably the way I wanted to kick it off. Is why innovate? Well, you innovate because frankly, we have to. Otherwise, we won't have a business going forward. So at some point. All right, next slide. So yeah, innovation is adoption of innovation is accelerating. So we know it may take the refrigerator 70 years before we kind of reach that critical amount of folks that have it as a necessity in their house. But as we continue to move through time, we're finding that from the idea of a device or an idea of some sort of innovation to the time where it's fully adopted through the population is just shrinking. And so with that in mind, it's not only is it important from a sustainable business over the decades, but also maybe even in shorter time periods. All right, next. All right, so I think one question that people have is, as you're planning innovative projects, is how do you balance predictability with flexibility or the ability to adjust, using agile processes? And obviously waterfall gives us the illusion of predictability, and we like that. We like to have plans, we like to have milestones, we like to know that things are going to be orderly. But at the same time, as we march through our plans, things come up that we didn't expect. And the more innovative the project, the more of those unknown unknowns exist. And so, we can be much more predictable by doing things and not learning as a group. However, I think that the goal, given that we know we must learn and we must innovate in order to survive, we need to have more innovative projects. So we need to learn how to plan and balance again that predictability with the flexibility. And so there's all these questions that obviously we have at the beginning of a project, but I think we're going to have to start without having answered all of these questions fully. And so the question is, what's the right level of detail to answer these questions at the right time as we march and kind of jump in, not knowing everything in that way, and that's uncomfortable. But how do we do that in a way that's not reckless, that's not going to be where teams feel that there's no direction from leadership. And so I think that there's, again, that balance. All right, next. So at ASA Abloy, I think we think about innovation on a couple fronts here. So we kind of look at things that's how innovative is this project, so that we call it the radical front end. And then where that kind of core innovation, where maybe we know we're more certain that the technology will work. We just need a product, make a product out of it. And for those radical kind of front end things that we're not even sure the technology works, it's a cool idea. We treat those projects slightly differently than where we're pretty sure the technology can work in other applications, but we just need to maybe turn that into a product that we can market and sell. And so again, we kind of have two different ways that we handle that. And again, the more uncertainty, I guess the theme of this slide is, again, the more uncertainty, we know the more risk, then we know the more reward, but also we know that the more uncertainty and the more innovation, we need the team to be able to learn faster. So, I think that learning goes back to the resiliency of the team when things come up, back to the ability to pivot, the ability for people to adjust. Again, and the more innovation that we're taking on, and we know the more that we're going to need our teams to be able to learn along the way, not only from at the beginning setting things up, but knowing that things aren't going to go exactly as planned and being able to adjust and add value as they're learning. All right, next. So again, this is maybe a little bit of a, on the top is the more kind of agile, pivot or persevere kind of, lean startup kind of methodology we have in our radical front end innovative projects. We sometimes call that pre-product innovation. We're not sure if there's a product around it, but we know we need to understand it. We know we need to learn about this innovation, so that if our hypothesis does pan out and this technology is ready, then we can then quickly make it go through our gateway process. And that looks waterfall, but I look at it more like it's a Kanban. We have 40 projects or so at any given time. Each of those projects are somewhere along this gateway process. That's the bottom graphic. And we can look at, when we do our lean portfolio planning, we can kind of look every quarter as to how, within this Kanban, our projects are progressing or not progressing, and where those blockers are at a macro level, and allows us to have more standardized checklists around these products. And again, that's more on those core business innovations where we know, we've tested out a lot of that uncertainty on those PPI, that radical front end projects. By the time we get to those core business, we know that the technology, we've experimented with the technology, we've done a lot of that learning. Now it's really about learning how to bring this product to market. And again, that can be a lot more predictable, although there's still a lot of variation, similar to, building, a large high-rise, residential high-rise. You may have built, 20 of them in the past. Generally that there's not, for the most part, you understand where the bigger issues are going to be, but there's still going to be, adjustments and learning specific to that project, specific to to those people on the job and all of that. So that's what we kind of consider our newer product innovators on the core business. All right, next. All right, so I guess, so that was some of the process, but I think the most important thing when you think about Agile is, it's people, then process, and tools. I think people are really going to make or break the project, and you can kind of get away with maybe the tool isn't as efficient as you'd like. You can get away with maybe some of the process not working, although that's very important to make sure that there's consistent process. But really, if the people aren't aligned and there's not a learning team, there's not, the team isn't gelling. It doesn't matter how good your process is, it doesn't matter how good your tool is. Your people aren't learning, and they're not resilient. They're not able to adjust. Your project's going to fail. And so I think that's where what this presentation is really about to me is how can a team learn, not individuals on the team, but how can the team learn fast? And I think if you think about the metaphor of a brain, I think there's multiple things that impact, your ability to learn, or any individual's ability to learn. There's obviously the neurons, but there's, I think, the connections between the neurons. And so, we think about that. Oh, sorry. So there's a graphic here, you can kind of look at that. But, at the end of the day, it's the ability for that brain to, the connections within the brain to change as to the plasticity piece as well. So, having a network of neurons, and in the case of planning teams, having a network of people that are able to change, adjust within how those relationships work, but also within how the information is flowing. And the more connections, the more learning that we've learned. So again, when we think about our Agile teams, I think that's a metaphor I like to think about, is how well are these connections working? How frequently are they sharing information? Are they sharing it? Do they have multiple ways they can share information? And is it healthy? And is this team going to be able to learn as it's set up? Okay, next. Is there next slide, please? All right, so again, continuing on that metaphor, I think the connections we said, I think the frequency of connections, I think, say the average adult learner takes 7 times before it really sticks in anything they're learning. So when we think about that in terms of teams, it's not just because it was said in a meeting doesn't mean that it's understood across the larger team. And I think that that's a common misconception. Or, hey, I sent the email, the information's out there, it's on, the team, if people didn't get it, it's their fault. I think similar to the brain, you're not, the team, we need those frequent reminders, those frequent planning discussions in order for it to really be functioning as a learning team. I think, when you think about mastery in athletes, for example, you hear about things like purposeful practice, you doing things over and over again, but also, the repetition isn't the only part of that. It's also the purpose. And so I think, if you're, shooting free throws, if all you're doing is just throwing, but you're not learning, you're never going to improve if you're just doing it the same way over and over again. It's about studying and getting that feedback and understanding why why am I shooting free throws, and these type of things that are really going to make the brain get better at whatever the thing is you're trying to learn. And similar for teams, I think if there's no true vision and the team doesn't believe or buy into what they're working on, then it's going to be hard for them to learn as a team. I think, obviously the brain is part of the body, so a good diet is going to impact our ability to learn as individuals. I would say, maybe the thing with teams is it's the culture. I mean, if we come to work every day and work gives us energy, then we're much more likely to be resilient. We're much more likely to be open and share what we're truly thinking. If we come and we don't trust our coworkers, or we don't feel good around them, then we're going to, obviously not share as much or as often, and therefore the team cannot learn or adapt or adjust as well. Psychological safety has been proven to be the biggest driver of successful teams. I think that's well documented. All right, next. So the consequences of learning, non-learning, I think we've all seen this. Like some teams, like what were some examples of the best team that you've seen, and what was the outcome? They're probably a learning team. It was there are going to be issues, and when those issues arise, what is the behavior that the people take? Do they shut down conversation and start building up evidence to I guess go to court to prove their case, or do they deal with those small issues so they don't become bigger problems that don't then be, what are we visioning ourselves towards within teams? Are they, a team with high trust, they're going to work through issues real time, while they're small, they're going to flow their issues. When the issue flow stops, that's when we have problems. And that all boils down to those teams learning, teams being able to have conversations, being willing to share within. Again, when that sharing stops, that's when real big problems start happening within teams. Challenges, when people are challenged, do that lead to better outcomes, or do they just crumble and fold? I think it goes back to that fragile discussion earlier. Or challenges can actually make us all better, and that we're actually, in order to be better, we need to be challenged. But if we see challenge as something to be avoided, then we will just stop. And that's, again, if a team is not learning, then they're going to stop and start pointing fingers, and you're going to have a worse outcome. Obviously, less attrition. It's not sustainable to work in a team that's not learning. It's just those relationships are going to impact the experience, and then people will either leave the team, or you'll have a hard time attracting good people to those jobs. So it's a positive feedback loop. People want to work on teams where they can learn. All right, next. All right, so I like this slide. This is I won't go through everything here, but I think one of the things when I walk around and I look at the teams, I kind of think about where are they on this. Maybe this is a maturity scale of, like, the left being lean, agile, not mature team. On the right is lean, agile, highly mature team. And obviously people are generally somewhere in somewhere on a spectrum here, but I think the idea is efficiency, reactive versus responsive. I think that's when I think about reactive, it's sort of like we're overburdened, we don't have enough time, we're fighting fires. Responsive is, I have planned for the unknown, and when it comes, because I know it will, I'm able to thoughtfully respond to that in a way that will not only solve the initial problem, but also keep that problem from happening again. So that means that we have, again, planned capacity to do so, and that's a whole art and science behind that. Obviously we talked about a lot of that. The culture is a huge talent. I think, when we just look at cost, and I think this is huge in the construction industry. If all we're doing is we're looking for low cost, that's not that's not really what we should be doing. We should be looking at who's the best partner. And again, that's, well, I don't need to go into that. I think everyone here has probably felt that on multiple jobs or multiple projects. Again, I alluded to this one earlier. If we're tool focused or process focused, and we don't really think about that, how healthy is the network of people? We should start with the people, and then let the, and the people, this process should support the people, the tool should support the process. I think, sometimes we, on the default answer line, I think when you hear the default answer in a team is no, or or conversation shut down, or authority is used when maybe it would be okay to diverge in a small way. I think that can do some damage to the learning of a team. I think sometimes you can say yes if, and then say what you think the consequence would be if that thing were to happen, and obviously do it in a respectful way. And then you never know. Maybe that if is not a big deal to them. In your mind, it was a deal breaker. In their mind, that's not a big cost. And so I think if we just reframe of why do we think this would be a negative, like, yeah, we could do that. It would just mean that we wouldn't be doing this other thing. You're like, oh, okay, well, I think that's always sometimes just sharing, that the team can learn, like, what are the consequences. When we, the next one, when we try to stop failure from happening, that's it's based in fear, and that can, again, shut down conversation or shut down sharing of potential failure. Sometimes if somebody fails and they know that they can take care of it, they don't necessarily have to share that it even happened. That means the team's not going to learn about that thing and that thing that went wrong, versus how quickly can we recover from failure. I think that's the better focus, and I think smaller failures are better than one large failure. That is, again, that's probably been some time in the making usually. Push versus pull, and just transactional versus like long-term relationships. So again, like anytime you look at a team, you kind of look at it, I kind of looking at it from these dimensions, and I use it as more of like a maturity assessment with teams to say where on a spectrum would I feel this team is, and then work with them on the specific area that maybe makes sense for that team. All right, next. So then I just did a little brainstorming for this, of just, to me, like, what are some of the success factors within Agile teams? The more people involved, the more complex things are, and after you get to about 12 people, it gets really hard to have those really close, meaningful Agile discussions. And so generally that's when it would make sense to start to think about, are there team of teams to start building out. Focus, I think the team needs to be focused on what is the product we're building. I think sometimes when people focus on their functional group over the product, that's where you see issues. And so any team looking at where their allegiance is fully lies. I think in construction that's a big thing. Is it for example your company, or is it the project? And I think that's always a hard thing, because we're incentivized in the construction industry. Sometimes that's not. Sometimes it's hard, and I think that's a thing that I know really in construction is a very big thing. Servant leadership, obviously, rather than commanding and controlling, understanding and removing roadblocks. Can teams release work autonomously, or do they need to hand things off and there's back and forth between teams? Obviously, the more a team is able to have the idea and then do the release themselves, the more likely they're going to be successful. Anyways, I'm not going to read through all these, but these are just some things I wanted to maybe brainstorm. I'm sure it's not a full list of what's out there. I'd love to hear some of your guys' thoughts of what you see as successful for Agile teams from a learning point of view. And definitely let's connect afterwards. But these are, again, just quickly some of the things I was brainstorming for this workshop or for this conference. All right, next. So I guess the next thing is, okay, when you have agile teams, that's great, but what about once your team kind of continues to grow and you start having tribes? So a tribe to me is like multiple agile teams that that work in a coordinated way. So once you kind of get a tribe of about 120, then you might create another tribe. And so anyway, so that's just that's kind of when you start thinking about like scaled agile teams, and and you start needing to have that balance between the autonomy of the agile teams, but the connected the direction, so that all the agile teams are marching in the same direction, and finding that balance, because that gets tricky, because the more coordination, the more feeling from the agile teams, if it's not done right, that they are not actually autonomous or in control. And so anyway, so as you scale your agile teams, you'll kind of reach this next level, which is kind of a tribe. And generally after you get past 120, then you need, then it's really hard for those autonomous teams to be coordinated, and you may need to start coordinating between the tribes rather than agile teams. So that's just something to consider. It's just a people thing, and people are part of this planning system, and our brains are wired in a way that we can only hold so many connections with others at various levels of depth. And so 120 seems to be where once you get beyond that, we need to start thinking again from an org design side. We may need to start thinking about, okay, what are other things that we need to consider with regards to tribes, and what's the tribe's purpose, and all these other things. But yeah, I think the whole idea is, as you scale, there's, from a people perspective and a learning team perspective, there is a balance again between the tightness of the group and the amount of work that needs to get done, and therefore the amount of people you need to get that work done, and how you organize those people to support that work. And that's a really big piece of it. And I think as we are building teams, and teams are moving from project to project, we need to be thoughtful about that, not just throw people at a problem and say, you guys figure it out, because they may figure it out, and some more experienced teams can do that. But I think other teams that are new to lean or agile, they may need a little coaching as to how to do so. So, all right, next. Yeah, so what breaks it is probably the opposite of what was on the previous slide. So, you can read it. And again, I don't want to just, these are just ideas, things that I've seen, where maybe we set up an agile team, and for whatever reason, things, through retrospectives, we're learning, these are common pitfalls, sort of thing. All right, next. So yeah, so what I was talking about before, the way the human brain works, and I think that's why why the team size is important, and what level of connected kind of relationship we expect of our people. So that's why agile teams are generally, again, 6 to 12, and you see that close friends to super family sort of thing. Like, that's what we want our agile teams to be. We can have the tribe of about 150 after that. We're not great as humans of really staying aligned. And so again, that's just a natural thing. If we drop a ball, we know things are going to drop at 9.8 meters per second square, in terms of it's going to accelerate towards the earth, and that's predictable. And similar, as we build our teams, we can set the conditions in a way that are predictable to whether or not those teams are going to function well and be collaborative. And so again, I think that's just a thing we have to consider, and we need to not expect that when we build a team a certain way that it's going to be collaborative, if we're building it in a way that the human brain is not designed to work. And that would be just throwing 1,000 people and saying, go collaborate. Now computers can do that, human brains can't. Anyway, so that's the reasoning behind it. It goes back to just the way humans are made. All right, next. So I guess just to take it back, with regards to maybe one challenge that we've had at Assa Abloy is just your geographic. We've got multiple regions. We're spread across the globe. We're trying to set up these teams. again, we have 400 folks up to 800, depending on what you consider folks that are supporting or directly controlled by the smart residential team. So anyways, this is something we continue to think about, and we have our teams working and our agile teams working in sprint, but we also each quarter need to bring larger teams together, and each year bring even the larger teams together to continue to stay aligned between our tribes, between our team of teams, maybe we call it the clan, and the and our agile teams, and make sure we're staying aligned at the right level of detail, at the right frequency, at the right times. And I would say we're continuing to explore and experiment, but overall, as we continue to grow, again, we're growing very quickly just through organic IoT is building. We're trying to make sure that we're not just growing I guess maybe the positive side, we're trying to grow in a way that supports all of these all these things we're talking about today. So just making sure our teams are the right size, and as we grow, make sure that we're thinking about what is a tribe and what is the purpose of that tribe, what is the purpose of the group, how might they work together, how might they be different, how and how might they so a lot of things going on. We want to have the right amount of connectedness across regions, but also ability for regions to control their own destiny. So a lot of things to consider, but we do want to connect our planning. All right, next. So again, going back to connecting our planning and trying to use scaled agile as a inspiration, and thinking about as we plan at multiple levels of detail at various frequencies, how are they connected, and how are we setting direction, but also how are we getting feedback and improving at all across the whole organization, across all the regions. All right, next. I think that might be it. Oh, and then we have some KPIs that we kind of look at around like products and things like that. We want to make sure that we continue to release new products at a rate that is I guess sufficient, so that we have fresh things out there each year. And so obviously that's something we look at, and there's a whole bunch of other things here. But from a process health point of view, we want to just make sure we're continuing to get better from plan versus actual, and getting that feedback to planning teams, so we know when we're over committing versus under committing, what that kind of looks like. Make sure that from the time we have an idea to the time somebody's delivered, we're able to accelerate that, and that's through focus and purpose, understanding how quickly we're removing roadblocks from leaders and things like that, and using Kanban and understanding capacity, so that we're not overburdening our teams. All right. So I know that was a lot, and thank you guys for sticking out and with all the technical challenges. I don't remember when, are we at time? I forget exactly when this, was supposed to end. But anyways, any questions or thoughts? Or comments?
Yes, maybe from my side. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Anton here. You was showing the interesting, diagrams or sheets for the planning of the activities, probably, of your team. Could you say what kind of sheets or things are you using for making these plans?
So we use different, like in terms of like the tools that we're using to document the like the outcomes of the planning sessions. So we, at the highest level, we'll use things like Miro, things like, where we're setting direction or setting, big picture milestones. And then at the medium level, we may still use Miro. We may use, usually it's Miro. So again, a very kind of more of like a whiteboard. Then obviously broken down, it would then get put into Jira Confluence, And then obviously for like within the sprints, it's all Jira Confluence tied to the epics. And so we use, Jira Confluence and Miro, depending on the agenda and the amount of structure, I guess, within the ceremony. So if it's a very structured, sprints are, we do them often, versus more of like a all week planning session that we have across all of the regions, or, with all the CTOs and all of the various, senior leaders. Then we may use something more like a Miro to really understand, be able to keep a loose agenda of, we generally want to understand certain aspects, but we want to create and have time to be able to dive deep into like 2 or 3 things within. So again, we want to be a more flexible tool for that.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
And but what about the organizational structure? Well, how many, let's say, team members do you have in your groups, on your teams, in average, or how is the whole organization structured?
Yeah. We're still, we're always, I guess, in a state of change. Each project continues to be different. I guess the history of our team is, so our team in San Francisco, which is where I am, started, was originally was August Home, which is, they made smart locks that works with Airbnb and other things. Anyways, they were acquired. August was acquired by Assa Abloy, and then that software team then was, I guess, is to support all of the other brands across the region, across all the globe. So you might see, what used to be the Yale or the August app now works for Yale locks, and some locks in Norway and locks in Japan. And so what used to be more of a regional team now needs to support a global team. And so over time, what's happening is where we used to have teams that were all co-located, we're trying to find ways that we can support regions, as each region has different needs and essentially have different customer desires and customer expectations of quality, with keeping agile teams together. So I would say that the structure, the format of our teams continues to change, and what's happening, and it's kind of, I think COVID is accelerating it, is we're having to continue to use technology, and we have to find ways to create transparency of work, digitally, versus having one true big room where everybody's co-located. And so that's both a challenge and an opportunity. But I would say we're still exploring what the best way of doing that is. But we, generally try to keep, teams balanced, and again, following those principles that we outlined earlier, just make sure the team is of the right size and autonomous and able to deliver product and focus on their product and not get bogged down in bureaucracy or things like that. But there's challenges. I mean, as a business is acquired, there's cultural things, and we just need, and I think overall the team has done a really great job of finding the new way of working in a larger company. And it's, we continue to iterate and learn as a team to how to best support our new customers, which are, kind of global. And I think one huge success, great thing for us is, whereas we used to maybe sell, I don't know, tens of thousands of locks, now we're selling millions of locks. So it's like, the scale, when you have the ability to scale, across, you have the best of both worlds, when you have small agile teams, but also you have the scale of these, regional sales teams. And I think that there's a lot of value, but it doesn't come without some learning and some discomfort. So I think, again, if we can make that discomfort a learning experience and a positive experience, doesn't mean it won't be challenging at the time, but if we can come out the other side with, psychological safety, then I think the team is going to be more resilient, and we'll continue to see the growth that we're seeing. So
thanks.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I hope this took something out of this. Definitely feel free to reach out and let's connect. I'd love to continue conversations with everyone here and learn from you guys. And as I continue my journey in Lean and look forward to continuing the conversation. So thanks again, Stephen. Sorry to drop the deck on you, and I know it was annoying. So thank you so much, and apologies for the technical issues earlier on.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today. We really appreciate it having you. It does look like we are at time now, so we could either go back to the main room or wait here.
Cool.